The sun had not yet risen high enough above the rooftops when the sound of a nail gun snapping sharply shattered the quiet suburban morning. I winced in anticipation of the familiar rumble of my neighborhood kids on bicycles, sprinklers hissing. But not this. Before the echo died away, a painfully loud voice cut through the air. Stop. That building now. Or I'll have the city demolish it myself. I turned to find a woman in a bright neon tracksuit, oversized sunglasses pushed up on her, down her nose, storming up my driveway like a general storming a field. She grasped a tablet as though it were a grenade, her fingers already clicking pictures of the permit sign planted in my yard. This was Linda Voss, president of our homeowners association, a woman who treated her title like a scepter and confused her cul-de-sac for a kingdom. The irony, the permit she was threatening to tear apart had been signed by me, personally sealed and delivered as the deputy director of city planning. I bit my tongue, letting her rant, her voice going higher as she circled the plywood like a vulture. She didn't know she was threatening a sleeping giant. 2 weeks before I'd finally received permission to construct a humble office shed in my backyard, a sleek 120-foot prefab with a skylight and solar panels my wife Sarah had campaigned for. It fed up with my telecommute bleeding into our kitchen, where I'd walk back and forth during client calls, avoiding her cooking. We'd done it all by the book, filed plans, approved cleared zoning, and double-checked the HOA's own regulations, which, fun fact, didn't prohibit buildings less than 150 square feet. I thought we were in the clear. Then, Linda stormed down like a whirlwind. The crew had hardly dropped off their tools when she was knocking on my door, not inquiring but asserting, "You're breaking Section 3C of the HOA's aesthetic code." She growled, stabbing a manicured finger at me. I explained the clause only pertained to buildings over 12 feet tall. Mine was 9.6. She snorted as if I had recited verse and announced the HOA hadn't signed off when I told her my city-issued permit. She waved her wrist, asserting the HOA prevailed over local law on visual harmony. I almost laughed, but restrained. She stormed off, muttering about placing calls. That's when the actual chaos started. Within days, a notice from the city arrived in my inbox. My permit was being reviewed because of community complaints filed by the HOA. Linda had escalated from neighborhood nag to bureaucratic saboteur, manipulating processes. She barely knew the delicious twist that review process ran through my department. She'd thrown a Molotov cocktail into her own backyard, without knowing. I held the fire hose. I didn't push back. Yet I let her think she was gaining. She began sending HOA patrols, pesky retirees with clipboards to harass my employees, taking pictures and making veiled threats about fines one day. I caught her taking measurements on my lawn with a tape measure, muttering under her breath about setback infractions, resting on my fence, coffee in hand. I inquired if she needed a calculator. She dismissed me, spitting that she'd stop this in its tracks soon. Linda wasn't satisfied with simply targeting me. She attempted to turn the neighborhood into her personal army at an emergency HOA meeting and ginvite. Naturally, she distributed flyers with the title, "Preserving Our Community's Charm," claiming my shed would sink property values, attract pests, and block sunlight. She even proposed it would interfere with Wi-Fi, which received a chuckle from techie guy next door. The shed was smaller than most garages, hidden away behind my house, and in compliance with every regulation. But facts didn't count. To Linda control. Did I began documenting every aspect, her trespassing on my property, her wild emails to the city as if she was a zoning expert. Even her tirades were caught on my doorbell. "Cam, it was too simple," when she complained my shed was too high. I pulled out the architectural drawings demonstrating it was less than 10 feet when she whined about aesthetic incompatibility. I cited a neighbor's gaudy pergola that she'd never complained about. The turning point came one night as I took my dog. Linda was in the cul-de-sac, boasting to a neighbor concerning her city hall connections and that she'd have my permit taken away by week's end. "He doesn't know who he's messing with." She laughed. That was it. She'd swung too hard and I was finished playing possum that night. I went on the city's system and looked at her complaints. They were a mess of lies, phony contractor signatures, misced codes. Even a complaint that my solar panels were a flight hazard to planes. I opened a case file stamped civic interference with approved permits and referred to multi-department review. I placed my city badge on my desk. It closed, shining under the lamp. This was no longer personal, it was official. The following day, Linda swaggered onto my lawn, looking to gloat as my workers broke down. Instead, she came upon silent side-halted construction for a grander play when she rapped. I cracked the door with a new permit, this one state approved, categorizing my shed as a green infrastructure project with solar improvements and second story. Her smirk disappeared. "You've been obnoxious, Linda," I exclaimed coolly. "Time to see how the system operates." I closed the door, but Linda did not retreat. She doubled down. She pounded red stopwork signs into my flower beds, invoking HOA power to indicate violations. I took pictures of her trespassing, including one with her smiling next to a wonky sign. By evening, I'd submitted the proof to the HOA's legal board and the city's code enforcement. Her signs became Exhibit A. Then she crossed a line. Linda hired a private inspector, a retired handyman she found on Lanito Snoop in my backyard. My neighbor Mike overheard the guy admit he had no credentials yet. There he was, trespassing and taking photos. I filed a police report at work. I briefed my team. My colleague Ellen nearly choked on her coffee when she learned Linda was attempting to override a permit I'd granted. "She's battling the zoning boss with no idea who he is," she cackled. We agreed I'd back away from personally managing my case for openness, but I still counseled the review team. Linda's letters were laughingstock gold. She referenced irrelevant fire codes, asserted my shed would interfere with satellite signals, and reused her airplane hazard hogwash. We discovered her own home had unapproved solar heaters from 2010. The irony was too rich. Linda's campaign grew desperate. She held another HOA meeting, handing out flyers with a photoshopped picture of my shed as a 5-story office building, claiming I was opening a commercial center with food trucks and traffic. 2 days later, she filed another complaint stating I was constructing a party house for rambunctious tenants. The contradictions were laughable, but her lies were coming apart. I filed a revised permit which escalated to a state-level green energy review that shut my project out of her site under the Clean Structures Act. I also made a formal complaint to the HOA for breaking homeowner rights. Then I sent a legal packet to all HOA board members, explaining Linda's forged documents, trespassing, and defamatory social media posts, labeling me a rogue builder. The tide turned at the following HOA meeting. Linda attempted to avoid questions regarding her citations. Her house had failed inspections due to faulty wiring and an illegal fence. The clubhouse, her pride and joy, was closed for fire and mold code. Infractions residents grilled her about fines and locked facilities. I stood up, introduced myself as Deputy Director of City Planning, and distributed copies of her forged complaints. The room was silent, then hummed with shock. I did not shout or taunt. I allowed the evidence to speak. Linda's hands trembled as she looked at the papers. Her power shaking, a neighbor clapped, then ceased. But the message was unmistakable. Her reign was done. And Tip, anonymous, doomed her. A city clerk forwarded emails to me, where Linda inquired of a purported zoning insider how to make a pretended violation report. The messages were telling, complete with timestamps and attachments. I passed them on to the city's legal department, triggering an inquiry into municipal meddling. Meanwhile, my shed was completed. Solar panels, shiny, interior outfitted neighbors who previously aligned with Linda now requested my blueprints. The city investigation uncovered Linda had improperly used HOA funds to landscape her own front yard, directed money to her brother's business. She was fined, barred from HOA positions, and her brother's company lost its license. A local TV segment, HOA Power Trips When Leaders Go Wrong, included fuzzy images of her signature visor. All knew the community let out a breath. Kids rode their bikes freely, porches were filled with laughter, and the clubhouse reopened with a suggestion. Board Marvin, the new HOA president, inquired me to advise on changes. We wrote up open voting regulations and neighborhood grants for senior homeowners at a block party. Residents thanked me for speaking out. I didn't do it to be praised. I did it because rules count, and bullies like Linda get away when we remain silent. My office, shed once a war zone, became my refuge. I put up a state-issued green certified placard facing Linda's house. It shined a silent sneer. She avoided me now. Her once thunderous presence was dwindled to a specter. One evening, Sarah and I sat on the porch, the sky lilac crickets trilling. "Did you think it would end that way?" she asked. I gazed at the shed, the peaceful street, and smiled. No, but when one swings too hard, the system swings back harder. Patience, paperwork, and truth tads.